In the summer of 1947, something fell from the sky. On a quiet ranch near Roswell, New Mexico, a strange craft, humming with unknown energy, crashed into the earth. It marked the beginning of one of the most secretive encounters in modern history. But what followed was never meant to be known. Years later, in a letter smuggled out before her death, a military nurse named Matilda O'Donnell McElroy claimed she was the sole human to communicate with an extraterrestrial being, telepathically. The being's name was Airl, and what she revealed could rewrite the history of humanity itself. The crash was reported by a local rancher. The U.S. Army Air Force moved in quickly. What they found wasn't just debris. It was technology unlike anything they had seen. Among the wreckage were bodies, not human, and one survivor, a living alien, humanoid in shape, but silent, small, thin. She, if gender even applied, offered no resistance. She was taken into custody and vanished from public record. Matilda was assigned as a medical observer. At the time, she was just 23 years old. But something strange happened. While others failed to get a response from the being, Matilda began experiencing what she called mental impressions. She described it not as sound, but thoughts projected into her mind. Over time, she learned to interpret them. The being did not speak, not because it couldn't, but because it didn't need to. Her species, Airl explained, had long since abandoned spoken language. Words are symbols. Symbols are limited. Thought is pure, Airl once said. It began slowly. Shapes, emotions, then clear messages. The military noticed. And Matilda was placed in a private room with Airl to begin structured interviews. At first, she wasn't sure who or what she was speaking to, but Airl spoke with the clarity of command. "I am a pilot," she said, "an engineer, and an officer of the domain." "What kind of weapons does your species have?" Matilda asked. "Very destructive, far beyond anything your planet possesses." "Then why did your ship crash?" "It was struck by lightning. Our systems failed temporarily. We did not anticipate the atmospheric conditions." Earth was not their destination. It was their concern. They had been monitoring our use of atomic weapons. "Nuclear detonations," Airl said. "Release ripples through multiple dimensions." "You are playing with forces you do not understand," she warned. Her mission was observation, not contact, until the crash. Airl belonged to a vast ancient civilization called the Domain. They do not eat. They do not die in the human sense. "I am not a biological being. I am not a physical entity. I am an IS-BE, Immortal Spiritual Being," she said. "I control this body as one would control a tool." Airl said she was currently stationed nearby, on a domain base hidden in the asteroid belt of our solar system. She also mentioned a secondary base on the far side of the moon. From there, she and others observed Earth's development. Matilda asked if her people had a symbol, something to represent who they were. Airl projected an image into her mind, a radiant emblem symbolizing the origin and boundless reach of the Domain's civilization, united across the known universe. The Domain had been expanding across galaxies for trillions of years, but Earth was not new to them. Thousands of years ago, a Domain battalion of 3,000 officers was stationed in the Himalayas, hidden by a projected illusion and shielded by a force screen. One day they were ambushed, destroyed by the old empire using a secret base on Mars. The attackers were part of what Airl called the Old Empire, an ancient regime that ruled this part of the galaxy for millions of years. Brutal, controlling, obsessed with order. The Old Empire created Earth's prison system, a planetary cage where IS-BEs are trapped, erased, and recycled endlessly. Even after losing their core planets, they still operate in secret, and Earth remains one of their strongholds. It was the first sign that Earth was not just primitive, it was contested. Earth, to the domain, was not a place to conquer, but to contain. Before the interviews could continue, Airl requested human books. She explained she needed to understand how humans think, to assess the state of Earth's development. Among the texts, Airl recognized something ancient. She revealed that during a previous mission to Earth, nearly 8,000 years ago, the last human language she had known was Sanskrit. Sanskrit is one of the oldest known human languages, with written records dating back over 3,000 years. It originated in ancient India and became the sacred language of Hinduism, Buddhism, and other spiritual traditions. Airl read at a speed Matilda described as inhuman. She understood quickly, commenting that much of human history was rewritten, misleading, or deliberately false. The system Airl described wasn't symbolic or religious. It was a real mechanism. It had structure, technology, and intention. Airl said Earth was not a place for spiritual growth. It was a prison. What people call reincarnation is not a natural cycle. It is a control system designed to wipe memory and keep souls, IS-BEs, trapped on Earth indefinitely. When an IS-BE dies, they are drawn into a grid. There, they're met with false imagery, bright lights, religious icons, and familiar faces. Illusions meant to confuse and mislead. The goal is to wipe their memory and identity completely, forcing them back into another human body with no recollection of who they are or where they came from. According to Airl, this is why past lives are forgotten, because forgetting is the design. Earth is only one node in a much larger system. Airl explained that facilities exist on the Moon and Mars. Older installations, automated, still functioning, but largely forgotten. Together, they form a containment network designed to keep IS-BEs controlled and unaware. This is why the system targets memory and suppresses any knowledge of its existence. Airl said that when an IS-BE begins to remember their past, their identity, and their origin, they become a threat to the system. Only one being is known to have escaped it completely. Known to some as the Old Master, he lived in ancient China. But according to Airl, he was more than a philosopher. He recovered his identity and walked away from the trap. Siddhartha Gautama, known as the Buddha, also recognized parts of the system and taught a way to break free from it. But over time, his teachings were distorted. What remained became ritualized, less effective. When I asked Airl why she was telling me all of this, her answer was simple. You were listening, and you weren't afraid to remember. Not long after, the interviews ended. Military authorities removed her. I never saw her again. They destroyed the official records and shut the entire project down. But I kept what I had. I took notes, and I remembered. I can't fully explain what she was, but something changed in me after speaking with her. She didn't try to convince me of anything. She simply helped me realize what I already suspected was true. There are things people don't want to believe, especially when the truth threatens the structure of everything they think is real. But someone needs to say it. That's why I'm telling you now. They erased the interviews. They erased the record. But not this. My name is Matilda O'Donnell McElroy. I was 23 years old when I first communicated with Airl. Not with words, but through direct thought. What I shared in the transcripts was only part of the story. There was more. More that I remembered, and more that I wasn't allowed to say. In the decades after 1947, something changed in me. I began to recall things I was never taught. Not from this life, from others. That's when I began to understand what Airl really meant. That we're not just human. All of us, every person on this planet, we're IS-BEs, Immortal Spiritual Beings. Trapped here, erased, recycled, forgotten. I didn't understand it at first. Why Airl chose to speak to me. Why I could hear her, and no one else could. It wasn't just about proximity or chance. There was something in me she recognized. Years later, the memories came back, fragmented at first, then clearer. I wasn't just a nurse. I had lived before, on Earth, in other bodies, across thousands of years. And before that, I served in the domain. Airl told me about the Lost Battalion. 3,000 officers from the domain, ambushed and captured by the old empire. They weren't killed. They were scattered, hidden in human bodies, their memories wiped, their purpose forgotten. I was one of them. That's why I could hear her. That's why she trusted me. Airl never showed emotion, but when she told me this, something shifted in her tone. The domain had not forgotten its lost officers. They had built something to find them, a scanner, unlike anything we understand. She called it the Tree of Life. It didn't search by name or by face. It searched by identity, by spiritual frequency. It could detect IS-BEs, not just where they were, but who they had been. Over time, the domain located every last member of the Lost Battalion, all 3,000, reincarnated on Earth, still trapped, still unaware. I was one of the final ones to be found. The scanner confirmed it. Airl didn't need proof. She already knew. I was told to never speak of it again, but Airl never stopped communicating. It wasn't constant. Sometimes months would pass. Then suddenly, she would reach out. A question, a memory, a flash of insight that wasn't mine. It felt like a signal, quiet, deliberate, just enough to keep me awake. She also warned me, they will try to erase you again, not just in this life, but after. And I believed her. At first, the memories came in dreams. A corridor, a uniform, a room with no ceiling. None of it made sense, until it did. I remembered being on a domain vessel, other bodies, other names, a medical wing, training protocols, the smell of metal, the texture of light. It wasn't imagination, it was data, compressed, buried, and slowly returning. I remembered why I volunteered, why I came to Earth, and why I never left. Airl didn't wake me. She reminded me. The rest, I had to find on my own. I kept quiet for decades. I followed orders. I stayed invisible. But I always knew. They'd come for my memories again. The system doesn't just erase who you were. It erases who you might become. Before that happens, I wanted to leave something behind. A record, a signal, a chance. You don't have to believe me, but if you've ever felt it, the sense that you don't belong here, that something's wrong with this place. You might be one of us, and if you are, you need to remember. I'm not afraid of death, but I'm not naive about what comes after. The next time this body stops, they'll try to wipe me clean again. I may lose everything I've remembered, everything I've written, but maybe not. Maybe someone will hear this. Someone who still remembers something they weren't supposed to. Someone like I was. My name was Matilda O'Donnell McElroy. And now, you know the part they tried to erase.